Welcome to session 1, where we start to dive into the writing process. Remember that as we go along, that things like 5-paragraph papers are the building blocks of writing. They are what we are using as a structure, a building material, to get to different kinds of papers, like a literary analysis and an academic paper and reflection paper. And they are also things that you can carry on with you. The cool thing about them is that they can shrink. So that same concept that we're learning about having an introduction, having supporting paragraphs, having a conclusion can turn into 5 sentences. So a sentence that introduces our topic, sentences that support it, and a sentence that concludes that full paragraph. It can also expand, so it can become 5 chapters in a book or 5 books in a series. We do say things like 5 paragraphs and 3 supporting points, but please know that these are just building blocks, and the more comfortable you get, the more those things are bound to change. Sometimes you're going to want to have maybe 7 supporting points. When you get to huge papers like 25 pages or more, you're going to need more paragraphs, and this format is going to grow with them. But right now, we're just practicing those building blocks until we get really comfortable, and then you'll take off those training wheels and go wherever you intend or want to go. So today we are looking at our weekly overview. I like to set up all of the chats like this so that you can see the different elements that we're going through that week and to make connections for you. A lot of times we think, well, we have this outcome and we have that assignment, and we think they're all separate. But they're not. They are all things that are interconnected, and there's a reason for why we put them together. So I always hope that by the time we're done with this, you'll start to understand that and process it and start looking for it in other classes as well. So our readings are here. I like to put them in a couple of places so you can have those links readily handy. In this particular instance, we're looking at a lot of chapters, so many, but I want you to think about the fact that when we look at the full reading list, we're probably going to read most of these again, and that we should be skimming. We should be looking through the book and looking at headings and subheadings and asking ourselves what catches our attention, what is surprising, language that we are maybe not familiar with or we haven't heard in a while, what just looks interesting, like, oh, I need to know more about that, or I want to know more about that. So we're kind of flipping through it and getting an idea of what this particular textbook has for us. The aim with classes like 103 and 106 is to build sort of a library for you where you know what sorts of books to look for, and you have a good index so that you can look for different writing issues or ideas, and that should serve you in not just our class but in lots of other classes. So I always hope that this one or ones in further classes will be something you want to keep. It's always a good thing to have those on hand, but at the very least, we should introduce you to some great websites like this one, the Purdue OWL, where we're going to get lots of really great support for writing and APA. I like to include our biblical perspectives in the chats as well, just so you can be thinking about these ideas as we tackle them. So in this one, I like this point about how writing can be a task that involves details, different details, lots of different ones. They're challenging in their own ways, but they're also exciting. So part of what we're doing when we're learning to write is that we are enhancing our reading skills. So they help each other. If we want to be writers, if we want to better any particular type of writing we're doing, go read that particular approach. You want to write fiction? Go read fiction. See what people are doing. It's especially important when you start to say, well, if you're telling me my introduction should catch the reader's attention, well, is there an article that you remember, or do you have a hard time remembering a good one? Go look at those beginnings and ask why they didn't stick in your mind. Ask what that writer could do to gather your interest and hold it. When we're working on our thesis, start to look for that in everything that you read. It should be pretty much near the end, the ultimate or penultimate sentence in the introductory paragraph. Sometimes that introduction, because of the length of a work, could be 2 to 3 paragraphs or 2 to 3 pages, but we're looking right there at the beginning in terms of scale for that thesis to be near the end there. So look for it. Start underlining that in any work that you read. Start to look at these building blocks as things you're using, but also things that everyone else is using. And so these same ideas go here into Hebrews and Ecclesiastes, that we're working on details, we're trying, we're processing these ideas and utilizing them. So this writing process idea, in every class you'll have a syllabus, you'll have outcomes per week. It's a great idea to glance through them and see sort of what they're angling at and to ask, well, how does this work with what we're studying? How could this assignment support these outcomes? So in this week, session 1, we're looking at the definitions of the writing process and of essays. We want to know what the building blocks are so that we know what kind of structure we can make from them. We're also going to learn the importance of knowing your audience and knowing your own purpose and using evidence and support. So lots of great details. And of course, that clear thesis. We're going to be tackling these ideas in so many ways over the next 5 sessions. And each time we are growing, we are learning, we are processing these ideas. So if you don't feel confident about them now, you definitely will by the end of the term. And it's not something we know right away. It's something that takes time to process because it's not going to look the same in all the things that we write. If we write a letter to a friend, our purpose and our audience, our thesis of what we want to tell them and how we're going to do that, it's going to look really different than an academic paper or even a discussion thread. So get to know that, get ready to learn that, and to get comfortable with it. You are not expected to be perfect. You're not expected to know how to do all this. Everything that you bring to the table is just an exciting addition for this particular class. Our 3 outcomes this week is that we want to really understand grammar, punctuation, and style basics. Our quiz is going to cover this, and it's going to cover lots of things that are in the textbook, but the study guide that I'm giving you has only different pages listed, so it may say like chapter 20 or page 284. These are all from your textbook so that you can go through it and find those specific areas and examples. But there are also lots of links to other resources where I think someone's talking really well about a grammar concept. So you'll find things like the Purdue OWL out there as well. It's not that we need all of these things to be like at our fingertips, that we need to memorize them all. It's more that we are looking at writing and we're going to start to process why a sentence isn't working. We're going to be able to say, well, that one didn't work and this one did. So what did I do? How did I make that happen? And part of that understanding is that we need to know the words to look up. And that's what I'm here for. I'm here to guide you to the parts that you want to explore and get better at. So for instance, parallelism, that's a big one. It gets tricky when we're making lists and we want those lists to have sort of a parallel structure, a mirroring structure. A lot of these things you'll sense in a certain way because our minds like alliteration and parallel structure. They love all of these kinds of things and it makes our writing stronger. So we're just going to figure that out. Instead of saying, that one's weaker and that one's stronger. What's happening? Now we're going to get the language we need to process that. And of course, we're starting with that thesis statement. We're going to keep hammering it away at it. There is no one single statement, but there are formulas. There are building blocks for making them, and I hope that you'll get really confident when we're done. And of course, we're going to start practicing. So our first one is going to be about our goals. We're going to look at it in a minute, but we're practicing an introduction, body paragraphs, and a conclusion. So in this week, we have 4 assignments. It's busy this week. Our first one is getting to know you. I'll leave you to look at all of those. Share what you're comfortable sharing. Often we share a little bit about ourselves, and then for each class we often ask a couple of specifics, and you will find that a lot of students are on the same page, that you'll often hear similar weaknesses, similar strengths, and it's a really great process for me to hear what you are concerned about so that I can support and encourage you. So see what you want to answer with these questions. Then we're going to dive right in. Introductions. What do we get from them? What are they doing? How are they working? We're going to look at 2 examples, and you are going to pick. You're going to say 1 or 2. Which one's better? And why do I think it's better? Just remember this. There's no one single right or wrong answer. Explore. Be curious. Try to figure out what's going on with it. What's drawing you to it? Why is that happening? And of course, I make the final post on that particular discussion thread when we're done and outline all the reasons why I think each one is right, wrong, and what's best. But share, see what you consider. So as you read the 2 introductory paragraphs about swimming and about water safety, ask some questions like these. Which introduction is more effective? How does it feel that way to you? What's a good hook for it? What kind of thesis does it have? Does it have that thesis? And then we want to look at what could be the rest of the essay. What kind of ideas do you think that person writing it would then share? What kind of title do you think they'd come up with? And these are all just hopefully fun steps as we start to explore and ask questions. These are the two samples. So we have one that talks more about water and one that gives an example about 4-year-old Carl. I won't read them out to you because you're good. Then we're going to do our first paper, our 5-paragraph paper. And our topic is going to be the same for everyone. We're not always going to do that. We're going to give you some room to explore several times. But in this particular instance, we're not. We're saying, identify 3 goals for your educational career at CCU. Explain those goals and describe how you plan to achieve them. The purpose is that you're practicing this idea. So in your thesis, you would talk about your 3 goals, and in each supporting paragraph, you would cover one particular goal at a time, each of those 3 goals, and you would use examples and details to help us understand how you plan to utilize them and achieve them. Remember, it's APA. Check the Student Lounge for a template that I'll be posting soon. And of course, we're looking at APA details like 2 to 3 pages long. So make sure you're checking out my Do You Know video about how we count pages. The other parts that we need to think about for the next 2 slides are 1, introductory and concluding paragraphs. An introduction sets it up. It starts to share what we're doing and where we're going. It needs to do 2 things. 1, it needs to make us interested. You've started those kinds of stories, right? Where you pick it up and you're like, well, that just doesn't grab my attention. Well, that's what we're thinking about here. How can I get that attention? And there are really cool links to things that can help us figure out what kind of hooks are traditionally the better ones. And then, of course, from there, remember, we're learning building blocks so that you can then go wherever you need to go as you continue your education and into your professional life. And we want to tell everyone where we're going with it. One of the big shifts when we start writing academic and professional work is that we don't want surprises. We tell our audience right away in the very first paragraph, this is what I want to explain to you, and this is why it's important. And we tend to lay out all 3 of our examples, all of our, not necessarily 3, but all of our supporting paragraphs right there in the introduction. We want everyone to be able to glance at that and say, okay, is this something that interests me, that will be useful for my work or my knowledge? And as you start to read articles, look for that in the beginning. Are they laying all of that out, or are they sort of reeling you in with like gentle hooks of like, well, do you want to know more? Do you want to know more? You'll find that it's a big difference between journalism and blogging and writing academic articles, because we have so many articles to read and we really need to know whether or not they're going to fit into what we want to learn about. So I always skim those introductory paragraphs to see if it's really going somewhere that I need to go. And I trust a writer a little more when they share all the necessary details right there at the beginning. And it should, of course, culminate with our thesis statement. This isn't, again, a tried and true, like everyone has to do it, but depending on the type of work we're doing, especially when we're looking at something like a 5-paragraph paper, the final, the ultimate, or the penultimate, right before the final sentence, are good locations for a thesis. Again, as you read, start looking for where people have put them. Start asking how big the work is and what that means for where we put thesis. So for instance, in a 25 pages or in a book, is the thesis still going to be in that very first paragraph, or is it going to be in the first couple of pages? And it should prepare our reader. So no surprises, nothing wild. We want our reader to know where we're going. Next, we want to have these strong supporting paragraphs. We want our reader to say, those are the details. So we want to present an idea, we want to support it with an example, and then conclude that idea. Now to our final element, we have a quiz. We're going to have quizzes every week, apologies, but they are really useful because it's not just about what we're reading and exploring, but about saying, what do I really know about this? However, over the years, I found that there are a lot of different ideas for how we should take quizzes, and they're not always right. So I want to set you up for success. Our quizzes clearly state that you can take them more than once. So if we've got 2 or 3 times that we can take that quiz, we already have some strategies in mind. So first things first, I just want you to take the quiz. 1, you're going to be really surprised by how much you actually do know. 2, when we're starting something, sort of like the first day of class, the first day at a new job, like all these different situations, we're kind of nervous. We don't know what it's going to be like. We don't know what the expectations are. We don't know how comfortable we are with different things. But think about the second week or the second month of being on that job or in that classroom or having whatever experience. you're comfortable, aren't you? You are confident about what you bring to the table. So that's also what we're doing by just taking the quiz. It's not so much about our grade at this point because that's not what we're focused on. We're focused on getting rid of this brand newness. We are walking in and we're trying it. What kind of buttons do we punch? What does it look like? How are the questions worded? Like, what is multiple choice? What isn't? Generally, ours are going to be multiple choice. But you're practicing all this kind of stuff. And yes, you're going to be surprised by what you do know. Then I want you to look at the study guide. I want you looking at your textbook, and I want you asking me questions. As you explore that study guide, and look at the textbook, does it make sense? Do you feel like light bulbs are going off, that it's connecting for you? Or do you find yourself still feeling not so confident? When that feeling hits you, that's when you reach out to me. So, I can go into that quiz you already took and I can see where you are, and that gives me a chance to direct you. You may say, those questions about that part of speech, I know that, I just blanked. And I can say, okay, that's awesome. I'm going to go direct you to this and that and the other. And as you're looking at these resource materials, I'm going to invite your questions so that maybe sometimes you're going to read them and you're going to be fine. But maybe sometimes you're going to say, it's just not clicking for me. Could you talk to me about it? Could we practice it? And that, again, is what I'm here for. Finally, we're retaking that quiz. We're studying smart. We have prepared. We've gotten the newness of what kind of exam is it? What does it look like? How long does it take me? What's this clock doing? All that kind of stuff. We're done. We are good with that, and we're ready to just focus on the material. And again, if things go wrong with any of these steps, if your computer glitches, if it kicks you out of the website, all these different things can and do happen. Not all the time, but they happen. Anytime any of that happens, please know that it's easy for me to see that from my side, and then I can clear you for a second copy of the exam for an additional try. I do want to stress this. It is not cheating to do it this way. We are working smart. This is why we have these options. When we're assessing your knowledge, it's not so that we can say, well, on day 4 at 3 p.m., this is the knowledge you had, we're done. Instead, we're saying, what do you need to work on? What is making sense? What's not making sense? How can we help you grow? And that is the grade I want to have in the grade book. Not that first one where we're trying things out. Finally, these are some of the topics that you're going to explore as we go through it. And I want you to realize, we don't think about this all the time. We're writing active sentences. We are assessing subject-verb agreement and getting it ready. We're often doing parallelism because it makes sense to our minds, but you probably don't think about the language. And that's what we're working on. We're saying, maybe now when I look at this idea, I can keep going further and I can look up more about the concept. So even if you're using really great resources like Perla and Grammarly and all these different things, which are awesome, now you can say, oh, they told me that I wasn't using parallel structure here. I know exactly what they're talking about. That makes perfect sense. I don't have to read 5 examples to get there. Now you're ready to go. And that's what we're focusing on. And again, you don't have to be perfect at these because we have all those wonderful resources in today's world, but we're just testing the waters and exploring. I don't think I will ever be able to completely distinguish lay and lie. There are points that are missing for all of us. So do your best, explore, and as always, try to have a little fun with things because we are learning, we're growing, we're trying, and that is all I want from you, that you are practicing and doing your best. These are all great ways for me to connect with you and see how you're doing things and where I can step in to make sure that your voice is as clear as possible, both in this class and going forward. That you are informed consumers as you consume knowledge and share it with others.